Stars
Podcast. This is the
Let me talk to you. This is such good shit.
getting back to the grind here. It's been a hell of a busy week for me, but that will not ever stop me from making sure I get my weekly dose of bad wrestling programming. That's why the Friday podcast is the show I look forward to every week, because it is also where we do our retro reviews series and talk about a time in wrestling when things actually made sense and the business wasn't complete trash. So if you're ready to hop on board, welcome, and thanks for stopping into the 5 Starr Wrestling Report, here each Monday and Friday for new content and new shows on a wide variety of wrestling topics. If you are here checking the show out for the first time, as always, make sure you subscribe and click the bell icon to stay notified of when our posts go up. We are also on Rumble if you prefer to watch the show there. I know YouTube content for smaller channels are hard to come by these days, thanks to the setup to fail algorithm system they have in place. It's amazing. 10 years ago, I may have been able to stand a chance of moderate YouTube success if I'd have stuck the course, but well, sometimes life gets in the way and you need to take a break from your hobbies to get your life straightened out. Speaking of people that need to get themselves straightened out, we've got AEW Dynamite on the horizon to talk about, which, that was a show that kind of happened. A lot of shit that happened, but I don't quite know if it all stuck. We'll get to that in a minute. And of course, we've got the continuation of our discussions on NWA World Championship Wrestling and World Class Championship Wrestling. So let's just dive in and get going with things. I think I've recovered from the traumatic experience of having endured the 5-hour Revolution spectacle on Sunday night, so I went into this one with a fresh mind. And AEW returned the favor by providing more of their usual cram in as much shit into 2 hours as humanly possible so that you really don't remember a fucking thing the minute it's over. We begin the show with Chris Jericho coming out. And I do want to say something about Jericho from the onset, because I was very aggravated after the Kingston Jericho match at the pay-per-view. I honestly didn't even feel like talking about this at the time. Obviously, I have been highly critical of Jericho recently. Honestly, since the fallout to the whole Inner Circle Pinnacle feud and the pay-per-view match where he beat MJF with the submission, I've really kind of soured on Jericho in more ways than one. For so long now in AEW, it just feels like Jericho is doing more harm to the show than good. And the more I see of him on TV, like, the less I just want to see him, period. However, with that said, I have noticed that he's cut back and trimmed out a lot of the body fat recently. He's less gray and pale than he was, say, 4 or 5 months ago. Generally, he looks a lot healthier now. Looks like he's actually decided to tan a little bit and hit the treadmill. And, I can even tell by the look in his eyes that he just feels more mentally and physically stable. So that's good. Obviously, criticisms aside, I'm not a completely heartless bastard. And, when guys are doing the work to stay in shape and take care of their bodies, I always give that a stamp of approval. That's why I've also been relatively harsh on Adam Cole and his physical state lately. And granted, I had absolutely no desire to see this Kingston Jericho program feud continue after the pay-per-view. And by the time the segment was over, I really didn't want to see this feud continue. But I'll get to that at the end. Started off fine, with Jericho talking about why he refused to shake Kingston's hand at the pay-per-view after their match, but he wanted to make things right. So, of course, red flags immediately go off, but cue stupid babyface Eddie Kingston for falling for the thing hook, line, and sinker. And Kingston cut a relatively good promo here. I appreciated him telling the heckler and the crowd to basically fuck off with the what chants. God, you talk about all those stupid chants that never seem to die in this business. Someone should be paying Steve Austin royalty checks for that abomination. You know how rich Steve Austin would be right now if he'd have trademarked that chant in 2001? But Kingston had mentioned how Jericho got inside his head. He planted the seed of doubt that he couldn't win the big one. But the reason Eddie showed up at the pay-per-view was because of the fans' reception and the fact that they believed in him, blah, blah. The normal white meat kind of babyface promo, which, I don't know, kind of felt weird coming from Eddie Kingston of all people. But he sounded genuine, so I could buy it. And they do the initial kiss and makeup deal. They shake hands. All seems right with the world. And of course, they can never quit while they're ahead. They have to drag out the goon squad to overcomplicate it. So out come 2.0 and Daniel Garcia in the next installment of the AEW feud that won't die. And they go to attack both Jericho and Kingston. And that eventually brings down Santana and Ortiz with baseball bats to make the save. And in a completely random swerve that makes absolutely no sense at all, after 2.0 and Garcia jump Jericho initially, Jericho is handed a bat from Ortiz to start ganging on the heels, and then Jericho turns and hits Santana and Ortiz instead. So I guess Russo booked this segment then. And boy, it didn't disappoint with adding more elements of stupidity, because Jake Hager proceeds to run down, all confused and perplexed as to what just happened. And then he swerves everyone, and he starts beating up the babyfaces too. And while they're all doing the fake-looking windmill punch brawling, it culminates with Jake Hager picking up Kingston on the apron to set him up for a powerbomb, almost dropping him in the process because they're idiots, and they actually had Hager try to pick this fat guy up while he was standing on the edge of the fucking ring. And they kill Eddie with the powerbomb through the table. The first of two major table bumps on the show. Because they can't just leave it at one so it'll have staining power and impact. Of course, they have to have Sami do one in the main event, so that completely soiled it. And the big heel swerve is all designed to introduce AEW's newest faction that nobody could possibly care about. The Jericho Appreciation Coalition. Hey, at least they're being openly blunt about the fact that it's all about appeasing Jericho's ego. And I guess it should also be noted, on the wrestling show where everything is rapid-fire crash TV and nothing ever has any long-term impact or meaning, because they had to try and cram in 6 weeks of content into 2 hours this week, did they actually bother following up with this new faction in any way at any point on the show? Did they do a promo backstage? Did the announcers bother staying on it and try to put over the significance of what we just saw? Nope. They debut a new faction, and it was immediately to the back for a CM Punk video pre-tape. Welcome to Nitro circa 2000. A segment that started off fine and quickly descended into all the usual AEW idiocy. And for the record, no, I do not care about a faction involving Chris Jericho, Jake Hager, 2.0, and Daniel Garcia. Not in the fucking slightest. So then, for absolutely no reason, completely unadvertised, Dante Martin wrestled Hangman Adam Page for the AEW World Championship. Why? Better yet, why not? Because Hangman Page is a lackluster world champion, so Now we're basically trying to do everything we can to get the people to care about him. So we're led to believe that somehow Dante Martin wound up being ranked number 2. How? I have no idea. Pretty sure the last time I saw Dante on television, he was part of a multi-man clusterfuck tag battle royal. And correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he just do a job to Powerhouse Hobbs no less than 2 weeks ago? But right. How silly of me to forget. I forgot that everybody in AEW gets rewarded for TV jobs with getting championship matches. And to be frank, I'm just going to read verbatim what I wrote down because there really wasn't a whole lot to it aside from what I jotted down. It goes 7 minutes and change. They did some fast-paced, no-selling, high-offense stuff for a while. And Hangman Page wins clean with the buckshot. The whole last 30 seconds was every fucking indie trampoline sequence you've ever seen, which is probably all you need to know where Hangman Page is in his current development as a talent. And they do the brief deal afterwards with Page putting Dante over and pretending like he's on a main event level when he's clearly not, and I don't think he ever will be. Not unless CM Punk or Bryan Danielson take him under his wing and actually teach him how to be a competent pro wrestler. I thought that's what they were going to do with him and Team Taz, but apparently not. And this was mostly used to set up Adam Cole coming out to challenge Hangman Page to a 6-man tag next week with 2 partners of his choice against 2 partners of Hangman's choice. Yippee. And frankly, I guess I should thank AEW for going in the completely different direction than I initially expected. I was sure they were going to do something stupid like have Adam Cole pick the Beta Bucks as his partners, but then Page would pick Red Dragon to fuck with Cole and continue that whole stupid saga that no one cares about. And then we find out later in the show that Page picked the Jurassic Express, and I was like, oh, thank God they're not going in that direction. It also looks like Adam Cole's been actively working on his promo stutter tick, which is good. And if you have no idea what I'm referring to, just go watch any Adam Cole promo. You'll hear it. So it's coming to this, I see. Bryan Danielson has officially entered the dark side in AEW. Long gone are the days of Danielson having great workhorse singles matches with real talent in the company. He's now officially teaming with AutoZone technician Jon Moxley.
So you have chosen death.
So I passively watched the match, not really going to get into it. Danielson's stuff was fine. Moxley sucks. I'm sorry. His shit looks so bad. I was more immersed in the post-match promo with William Regal, and boy did that man cut a hell of a promo. That was a 2-month built-up Rage of Fury promo, the likes of which you knew that man was waiting to vent to the public. But he covered a lot of ground in this. Talked about his history on the TBS station, his past with Tony Schiavone, and the fact that Tony still hasn't found a good tailor after all these years. Puts over Bryan Danielson and the fact that their names have constantly been mentioned together on AEW programming. Says that he and Danielson used to sit and train young guys for many hours back in the day, and Regal was eternally grateful for Danielson because he was the man that Regal knew he never could be as a worker. Talks about being appreciative of the fact that Danielson learned how to actually be a pro wrestler and not an indie outlaw geek like most young guys in the business today, which is why he's still working at the top level that he is. I also may or may not have put that into my own words, but you get the gist. And he said something about Mox, too. I really didn't pay attention to that. But here's what I will say. I still don't care about this pairing. I still don't want to see this pairing. But I'll be damned if Regal didn't do a great job explaining how it came together. at least I know they have a common interest going forward, and they actually provided context as to why they are teaming instead of just, well, we can't figure out anything else to do with you guys, so here, you're partners now. So it's a bitter pill to swallow no matter how I look at it, but whatever. I mean, Mox's ring work is never going to click with me, and even with the affiliation of Regal and Danielson in there, I don't know how much that'll help. However, I did not hate this segment as much as I thought I would going in, mostly due to Regal's promo work. He's still the fucking man. Can't deny that. And after Regal just gets finished talking about how he trained Danielson to not be an indie goofball clown, the next segment, the very next segment, who should be on camera but the job order? Doing every D- level Lifetime movie acting you've ever seen. Can't make this shit up, I'm telling you. Oh, and by the way, they were very sad that Hangman Page picked Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus to team with them instead of the Dark Order. Boo-hoo. Up next, we had Wheeler Yuta versus Pac, which somewhat caught my interest. I'm a big Pac fan, always have been, and when I knew he wasn't going to be coming out with the Death Triangle posse, I stayed a little more invested than usual. They almost gave me a glorious TV moment when the H&M mascot came out with his arm in a sling, after having apparently been injured during the ladder match when Keith Lee gave him that giant Beal out to the floor. And as soon as Excalibur said, "The injury won't require surgery," I let out a very audible "damn it" that probably woke up the neighbors. Match was okay while it lasted. I know my hatred for Orange Cassidy and the Best Friends always makes it seem like I'm actively dismissing them. And to an extent I am. You know, especially when it comes to Chucklefuck Taylor and Cassidy and Danhausen, those morons. Wheeler Yuta I actually haven't been all that critical of. He's not a bad worker, and if they just had him ditch the Best Friends and had him go out there and wrestle here and there, I'd probably have more of an interest in seeing him on TV. Maybe he'd be a guy to pair with Regal's group if their goal is to teach the young prospects how to work. At least it'll get Yuta working and training with actual pro wrestlers. Take Moxley out of the equation, obviously. Okay, serious question. Like, I'm not even trying to be a dick about it at this point. Why is this Cutler Cam bullshit allowed to air on TV? Who signs off on this? Tony? Look, why are you continuing to allow this fucking garbage to air on your show? It's so Bush League. It's so indie. It's so cringe. Like, this would be the point where you grow that set of nuts and tell the Beta Bucks to go take their Cutler Can crap and shove it up their rear sideways. So bad. Also on the show, for no reason, with no build-up, in a backstage pre-tape that went no less than 1 minute, FTR fired Tully Blanchard as their manager. Why did they even bother? And then we had the HFO segment. Probably the most notable thing on the show considering what ended up happening, but, well, notable doesn't necessarily mean good either. It could have been good if the people booking this shit knew what the fuck they were doing, but because no one agents or structures these segments coherently, it all just comes off so Bush League and stupid by the end. So Andrade and Matt Hardy are arguing about whether or not to kick Hardy out of the group. And when I say arguing, Matt Hardy was coherently arguing, and Andrade was speaking like he had marbles lodged in his mouth. And they do a vote to see whether or not they keep Matt in the group. Everyone except Blade and Butcher, whose input apparently didn't matter here. So Andrade and manager in question vote Hardy out. By the way, still don't know who Andrade's manager's name is. Still don't care. Private Party initially approve of Hardy staying in, but of course they have their backs turned to Hardy, so when they give the thumbs up, Matt Hardy's talking to Andrade, and they both turn the thumbs down. So that is the second major heel turn in less than an hour's time span. Again, these people just hotshot bullshit with no rhyme or reason. And they're all beating up Matt Hardy, something like a 5 or 6-on-1 advantage. Finally, after about 8 years, Darby Allin and Sting meander down to the ring to make the cough save. Guess they had a change of heart after the garbage brawl at the pay-per-view and decided, why not? We'll stick up for poor defenseless Matt Hardy here. So Sting and Darby, of course, get jumped by the heels for their troubles. Great save, guys. And all eventually leading to Jeff Hardy hitting the ring, theme music and all. And of course, he's not in a giant rush to make the save for his brother. Nah, Jeff Hardy's dancing on the stage. He's doing the whole pomp and circumstance, the whole crowd showboat fanfare. Meanwhile, Matt's getting pummeled like a fucking prune in the ring. Jeff's in no rush to get down there. And eventually, Jeff gets in there. They all run off the heels. Again, could have been a cool TV moment if the people in charge knew how to book debuts right. But in AEW, everything's sports entertainment-driven television, so of course they were going to horribly botch Jeff's debut. Do you really think they wouldn't? Now, that said, Jeff Hardy is a big deal for them to get. It's an actual name with star power that longtime wrestling fans know. So, good on them for being able to work out a deal and bring him in. Why this didn't happen at the pay-per-view, I couldn't tell you, but again, they don't know what they're doing. And of course, it ends with the big tease of the Hardy Boys facing off with Sting and Darby. And all I can say is when the lasting 2 camera pans they do for this segment were between Sting and Jeff Hardy, bad times. And then we had Wardlow out for a promo with Tony. And, this was bittersweet in a couple ways. All right, first off, let me just get this out there in the open because we see this all the goddamn time when Tony's in there interviewing guys. Either have Tony fucking conduct the interview or just don't have Tony in there at all. It makes no sense for him to pass the mic off to someone while he just stands there with his hands folded like a geek while the wrestlers talk. Stop doing that shit. Second off, I don't know if I would have had Wardlow cut this promo. I get that they were trying to explain what happened at the pay-per-view with him and MJF, but Wardlow doing the long-standing, sympathetic babyface promo, I don't know about all that. That doesn't really fit the monster powerhouse Wardlow they've been building up on TV. Like when he's in there squashing geeks and he was a mute, it was perfect. We didn't need to hear Wardlow talk. All we needed to do was watch him pound guys and kill them in short order. The action spoke for him. Yeah, but when Wardlow's out there doing this promo and talking about his family life and history, again, like I get what they were going for, but I don't like this coming from him. Especially when he's talking about MJF being a bully and disrespectfully putting his hands on him. Like a guy like Wardlow shouldn't have to talk about that. He should just grab MJF by the scruff of the neck and put him in his place by threatening to beat his ass if he ever touches him again. Now, all that said, this was a good promo, and the delivery was particularly good. And I liked Wardlow mentioning that he's free of the handcuffs, he's on his own, and while he still technically works for MJF, he doesn't give a damn now because his sights are set on the TNT Championship and more. And that was good. And again, there's a couple possible directions they can go with this that would make a whole lot of sense. Obviously, you've got the MJF Wardlow contract to hold overhead. You have the potential of MJF screwing Wardlow out of the TNT title and furthering the tension there. I think it'd be a mistake for them to simply blow off the full Wardlow split from Max without having him put him through a table with a power bomb or something. Like, even if Wardlow's a semi-babyface now, they definitely need to keep the bodyguard relationship going with those two, at least in the short term. Like, once MJF wins the world title, then you can go the direction of having Wardlow fully break from Max and then challenge him for the belt down the road. But for the time being, I still would keep those guys closely linked together. So, in some good segment, I get what it was designed to do, but I just didn't think it was the kind of promo that the character Wardlow needed to cut. Like, I might be in the minority with that, but I'm okay with that because I'm in the minority with most things I say about AEW, and I'm yet to be proven wrong about a lot of my major criticisms of this company that everyone else seems to overlook. We had the Jurassic Express Acclaim Tag Title match, which was notable for one thing primarily, that being Max Caster making fun of the fact that Jungle Boy can't grow pubic hair. And again, I know I've talked about this before with the Acclaim, but I gotta bring it up because if I'm supposed to take this company seriously and I'm supposed to believe that this is a sports-driven wrestling show, then the win-loss records should conceivably be something of value, correct? So I'm going to ask the question. How did the Acclaimed earn this tag title shot? What key match or matches have these guys won on television? Not the fucking YouTube show, morons. I'm talking about their national cable televised network show where the vast majority of these people are watching them week to week. What key televised matches have these guys won to earn this title shot? Anyone? Anyone want to help me out with that? Did these guys not just lose a gauntlet battle royal no less than a week ago? As far as I recollect, they weren't booked on the pay-per-view in any way on Sunday. They didn't have a major defining victory on that show to set up this title match. So why are they booked here? Well, the answer is their tag division is trash and they have no other credible challengers. The match was okay, I guess. Luchasaurus, by far the most entertaining part of the match. Like, him just impatiently pacing like a caged animal on the ring apron while the heels are getting the heat on Jungle Boy, that was the best part of the whole fucking match. And look, I get the criticisms of Luchasaurus. He's not the smoothest worker in there, but like, he's the kind of big guy that you could really market and brand, especially to a younger demo. Of course, with the way AEW operates, it might not be a great idea having kids under the age of, say, 7 watching this crap. And aside from Luchasaurus being awesome, I mean, there really wasn't a whole lot to it other than that. A bunch of moves, lots of pre-planned choreography, lots of no-selling, and the faces retained clean in the end. Really can't say a whole lot about it other than that. We had Layla Hirsch versus Thunder Rosa, with the winner getting the title shot at Britt. At least this match had a little bit of build going in, and it actually made sense considering the fallout from the pay-per-view. Thunder Rosa got screwed out of the title, so she was guaranteed a second chance at redemption, and Layla at least beat Statlander on the pre-show. I kind of sort of paid attention to the action here. There was some obvious choppiness here and there, but most of what I saw at least looked like something resembling pro wrestling. They were at least bothering to work a body part for a change. The whole Red Velvet angle with her running down to thwart Layla trying to use the turnbuckle post was tacky. Like, come on, we're just supposed to believe that Velvet scouted ahead of time that Layla was going to break out the ring post and that she was right there to stop her in the nick of time. Like, I know it's a small detail, but if this shit happened in WWE, you'd call it out. Don't even pretend like you wouldn't. Not a bad match, all things considered. Too long, but that's par for the course in AEW. And Rosa going over, of course, sets up her and Britt in the cage for next week, which I am actually looking forward to. It's the only long-term women's program AEW's booked that's actually kept my interest. And the cage element will make things more interesting, although I still expect copious amounts of bullshit to go down one way or another. Hopefully it'll all be rendered with Rosa going over and winning the belt, which I imagine she will. And our main event for the show was Scorpio Sky and Sami Guevara for the TNT Championship. Scorpio's first TV match in 6.5 years, give or take. Probably would have been more on board with this match if Ethan Page was getting the title shot instead, but yeah, it's more nitpicky than anything. I appreciated the Phantom Barricade bump that Scorpio took, where Sami was going to ram him into one corner of the barricade, but then Scorpio decided midway through to just slam himself into the other corner. That was epic. The big spot here was the completely nonsensical table bump that Sami took right before the commercial. A spot that would have been a perfect ambulance angle to, say, write Sami off of TV for a few months and close out the show with something meaningful. Of course, this isn't 1982, it's 2022, so it's purely a commercial break spot only. And oh, how convenient, miraculously, Sami's perfectly okay to compete once they come back from the commercial. Not that we don't see it in every fucking Sami Guevara TV match now. He does some stupid spot that somehow doesn't kill him. Doc Samson comes over to check him out, and the match keeps going, even though in any rational company with a booking crew that knew what they were doing, the matches would instantly be over. Not in AEW, though. It should also be noted that because all AEW refs are morons, Bryce Remsburg doesn't actually bother counting Sami out while he's laying dead on the outside of the ring in the rubble. But he's more than happy to just sit there outside the ring with Doc Samson for like a whole 2 minutes. So, of course, Sami ends up fighting back, completely stops selling the ribs while firing back on Scorpio, thus negating the whole preceding injury angle. And the finishing spot is Paige Van Zant ramming Ty Conti into the steps on the outside. Sami gets distracted by it, and then Scorpio hits him with the Death Valley driver to win the belt. Yes, not having Scorpio work Sami's injury over and win via ref stoppage or submission, but Scorpio wins because Sami is a fucking idiot, and he turned his attention away from Scorpio to watch his girlfriend take a terrible collision bump into the steps. So yeah, Scorpio is the new TNT champion. Why? I don't know. Maybe just to drop it to Wardlow because they don't want to do a face versus face title switch, even though we see face versus face title matches all the time, including this very show. I don't know what these people are thinking half the time. It makes no sense, but who cares? And the final thing before the show ends is Paige signing her AEW contract and slapping it on Ty's dead ass in the middle of the ring. And when I say dead ass, I do not mean that figuratively. Paige grabbed the contract, she put it on Ty's physical ass cheek to sign it, and then she slapped her ass cheek to close it out. Classy. And that was your newest installment of All Excessive Wrestling. I mean, come on, joking aside here, is it any wonder I keep reverting back to the same talking point about why nothing ever has any staying power on this show the minute it's over? And it's all continual Crash TV Monday Night Wars level booking? Like, think about what we had on this show from top to bottom. We had a new debuting faction, a contract signing, 3 championship title matches, one of which included their world champion in Seg 2, multiple heel swerves, a faction split, a Jeff Hardy debut, FTR firing their manager in a backstage segment, a Wardlow backstory promo, a William Regal Bryan Danielson backstory promo, and a title change in a main event that didn't feel as impactful considering the fact that the finish was so preposterous, and we haven't seen Scorpio in a TV match in God knows how long. That's a lot of shit to try and pack into 2 hours, dog. And be completely honest. Completely honest. Take the blinders off. remove all the biases. Just look at this show in a vacuum for a minute. Running down all those bullet points I just did. Without going back, how much of it did you remember after the show was over? 20% of it? 25% of it? And I actually paid more attention to the show than usual. I even take copious amounts of notes every week with this stuff. And even I have a hard time keeping track of all the garbage they do. It's too much. Too much. Too much. Not to mention, do you notice how quickly they completely looked past the Revolution pay-per-view from Sunday? There were no video replays of the pay-per-view, no packages or highlights, no heavy discussion over the fallout to the show. It was passively mentioned at the top of the program, and it was right on with the rest of the show. I'm not saying they needed to do a whole 2-hour pay-per-view recap, but I mean, could they at least pretend like anything mattered from Sunday night? Can anyone explain why the guys and the gals that just worked the pay-per-view didn't come out selling injuries or anything? It's only been 4 fucking days. Can't imagine they'd all be fully healed and recovered by then. Again, there's no attention to subtle details with these people. Quite frankly, the only rational thing that made sense overall was the absence of CM Punk and MJF from the show. Like, they just had a bloodbath brawl war at the pay-per-view a few nights prior. Obviously, they're not going to be out, or they're not going to be on the show. They're going to be out selling the effects of the show like professionals. Not Moxley and Danielson, though. No, those boys were perfectly fine after having a similar style match. And those guys were none the worse for wear. They were firing on all cylinders on this show. And obviously, I have to mention these things because who the fuck else will? Dave Meltzer, Brian Alvarez. Good Lord, those guys are so in the tank for AEW. It's hard to imagine. Like, nobody knows how to do wrestling right anymore. It's ridiculous. Like, how is it that I have to be the guy that comes out here and draws attention to the small things? Small things that actually matter in the grand scheme of things. Selling injuries, pay-per-view fallout packages, sit-downs and discussions over the matches, character direction for all parties after the fact. Do we get any of that? No, of course not. A little bit of character direction here and there. Wardlow's was probably the most effective. But I'm looking at everything overall. I don't know. It's like by the time the show was over, I look back at that Revolution pay-per-view and the notion that I was given is that it was another one in the books and on to the next one. Like, nothing mattered from Sunday night at all. And let's be frank, let's not try to sugarcoat it here. What really did matter from Sunday night? Well, I'll answer that question. The only 3 things that have mattered on this show since basically late last year: CM Punk, MJF, Wardlow. The only 3 characters that I have any emotional investment in, the only 3 characters that make this show worthwhile watching every single week. Everyone else, collateral damage. All right, let's move on with the show here. What are we on here? World Championship Wrestling, the March 8th, 1986 edition. And this was indeed a special show. It did in fact feature a major title change, as Tony Schiavone and David Crockett had informed us at the beginning, promising to show us footage of said title change later in the program. The National Heavyweight Championship match between Dusty Rhodes and Tully Blanchard with the infamous Knuck Shot of Doom that I still remember all these years later. We begin the show with, I think, one of the worst promos of all time. And who should it come from but Ronnie Garvin? As we've clearly established by now, after having watched multiple Ronnie Garvin promos in successive weeks on this show, he's fucking atrocious when it comes to promo work. So, of course, they keep putting him out there to stumble over himself and flub his way through whatever nonsensical verbiage he happens to spew out. It starts with him barely being able to spit out that he's a part-time electrical technician, which, first off, how in the world is this supposed to rally people behind Garvin? I have no idea. Like, I guess the idea is the people will support him because he's a man of the people. He's just an ordinary, run-of-the-mill, blue-collar guy that the people can identify with. I don't know. It just comes off so lame on television. Like, it's not even like a cool kind of side hustle. You know, something like fitness training classes or image consulting or, I don't know, motorcycle riding. No, Ronnie does electrical work in his free time. Why would anyone cheer that? Or care? And he explains that Ric Flair is like a dictator because, this is almost a direct quote I'm reading here, he likes to dictate people. As if we needed the explanation as to what dictators do. And on the subject of dictators, he states that a lot of world leaders and dictators are now being, quote, deposed, exposed, and disposed. Well, it wasn't the most applicable term to use, but at least it rhymed. This promo was so goddamn lame. And not even like train wreck level lame where I could just laugh at it. Lame as in, why is this man still talking? Please pull the microphone away from this man and get the hook and yank him off of TV. And that led directly into Ron Garvin versus Tony Zane, which was far and away better than that lame duck promo. The match was a typical Garvin mauling session. Of course, anytime I get to see someone beat up Tony Zane, it's always a good time. Garvin, of course, won with the knockout punch, and all was right with the world. Following that, we got Paul Jones and Baron Von Raschke at the booth for a promo. And speaking of the topic of dictators, Paul Jones has in fact begun to grow out the Hitler mustache. And as we know, at this stage in 1986, the Paul Jones Army was starting to unfold here in their pursuit to run Jimmy Valiant out of the NWA, which was mostly what the entire promo was centered around. I also appreciated Baron Von Raschke, of all people, referring to Valiant here as the Boogie Woogie Man. And if you can just picture in your head what Baron sounds like when he says Boogie Woogie, yeah, it was pretty great. There was also a random point in this promo where Baron walked away from the booth to start verbally jousting at an unknown force. At first, I thought it was someone in the ring, but it also could have been a heckler in the audience. I have no idea. But the fact that the camera followed him the entire time made it that much funnier. Yeah, Barbarian versus Bill Tab was up next. I can only presume that Baron was not yelling at Bill Tab. We also had Tijo Khan out there, and, well, here's what I'll say. If there was ever the perfect guy to pair up with the Barbarian in 1986, Tijo Khan would probably be somewhere at the top of that list. Aside from that, though, this was every Barbarian squash you've seen before. My favorite part of the entire segment is Barbarian gets the pin, and the heels are all posing in the ring. David Crockett's line right before they cut to commercial. Barbarian, look at him. Dramatic pause. He's huge. Love David. He's so great. Also great, not a shocker here by any stretch, Jimmy Valiant. In this all-time classic promo he did at the booth with Tony. The kind of babyface promo where, unlike Ronnie Garvin, Jimmy Valiant is out there rambling and ranting about only God knows what. And he's so goofy and so phenomenally Jimmy Valiant, I don't even care that I had no idea what he was talking about. In fact, you know what? I ended up clipping a good chunk of the video here, so... what the hell? I'll just play the audio.
With you on World Championship Wrestling. And early on the program, Paul Jones mentioned that he was increasing his army. Directed at one man, and here he is, Jimmy the Boogie Woogie Man Valiant.
Woo, Mantell, Tony, the Boogie Man got the EBGBs. The Boogie Man has got the Goose Tatums. And it's not because my old lady just ran off with my best friend because I miss him. It's because of Paul Jones is building this army, this fun army. And I understand that it's going to get bigger. Yeah. Well, the bigger, the better is what the Boogie Man thrives on, you see. Where is the weasel? Did you say that or did I say that?
Someone here said that.
Who said that? That's what I'd like to know, baby. Weasel, it's war, all out war. You can bring all your big Europeans. They're big. Where they at from, brother? Singapore, from parts unknown. I don't care, brother. Build your army because this bar, this boogie woogie bar is going to be like Artie Murphy. I'm coming at you, Jack, and I guarantee you I'm going to have a pumper hot in this one in 85. All right.
Jimmy Valiant, let's go to the ring.
Sometimes words can't even describe how great something is. Sometimes just going with the original suffices perfectly. In a match that I'm not making up here, Leo Burke versus George South. Guess they needed a buffer. Either that or someone missed their flight. I will be honest, I know absolutely nothing about Leo Burke, other than the fact that I believe I've seen clips of him in the AWA. It sufficed as a quick squash, and I have virtually nothing to say about it other than that. Then we had Tully Blanchard and J.J. Dillon out for a promo. Again, our new National Heavyweight Champion. And Tully was basically out there to put over the fact that Dusty gave him a hell of a fight, but Tully's the man now. Dusty and Baby Doll can head to the back of the line. And now Tully has his sights set on Magnum TA and the U.S. Heavyweight title. Of course, still some bad blood with the fallout from Starrcade 85 with those two. A slightly more upgraded match from the buffer zone. Pistol Pez Watley versus Art Pritz. And here's all I can say. When Tony and David are spending more time talking about kids sending in letters about how great their 8th grade math teachers are, that about sums up how dreadfully boring the wrestling in the ring is. In fact, pretty much any time I've found that Tony and David are reading fan mail during matches, they're essentially letting you know, folks, if you need to take a piss break or something, take it now, because whatever's going on in the ring right now is really not all that important. We had Jim Cornette out for a promo to basically put over the Crockett Cup and put over that the Midnight Express are destined to win it. Really wasn't a whole lot to it other than that. Then the Midnight Express wrestled Brody Chase and Mike Samani. And Bobby Eaton was in God mode active this week. Usually Midnight Express matches on the show are enjoyable for mostly two reasons. One, watching Jim Cornette go back and forth between ringside and commentary to bury everyone. And two, watching Eaton and Condrey just fuck around with two geeks and beat them from pillar to post for like 5 straight minutes. Bobby Eaton was extra motivated this week because he was doing all kinds of wacky shit in this match. There's a part midway through here where Eaton is tagged in, And for some reason, he starts mocking Tony Schiavone at the booth. So while he's beating up one of the geeks, he just casually walks out of the ring, goes up to confront Tony at the booth. I believe he gave him a high five, or he tagged Tony in, and then he just went back to the ring and kept beating ass. There was also a part a few minutes later where they just stopped wrestling so that Bobby could shake one of the job guys' hands, and because the guy's an idiot, he accepts the handshake, and then Bobby starts beating him up again. So, of course, heels go over, and as they're doing the post-match attack on the jobbers, because why not, outrun the Rock and Roll Express to send the heels packing, and receiving probably the biggest pop of the entire show, Morton and Gibson trap Jim Cornette in the ring. They give him the double drop kick, and Cornette flies ass over tea kettle, takes a huge bump over the top rope to the floor, and when it was all said and done, it made me appreciate a time in the business where managers in wrestling were great, and it actually meant something of value when the wrestlers would get their comeuppance on the mouthpieces or the managers for being dastardly heels. Nowadays, you see a manager get taken out on TV, no one cares. Nobody cares. Like, even Dan Lambert getting his ass kicked by the Inner Circle didn't receive a quarter of the pop this did. This whole segment was fucking awesome. And keeping in line with great material on the show, we got the footage of the Dusty Rhodes Tully Blanchard National Heavyweight title match. I believe this took place during one of the Worldwide Wrestling tapings. And I'm going to try not to geek out too much here, but I just want everyone to think about this for a minute. Because I talk all the time about how, when it comes to fan reaction and story drama and ring psychology, you want a classic textbook example of how wrestling used to actually have real authentic drama. Go find this Tully Blanchard Dusty Rhodes title match. Watch it from beginning to end. And just listen to the crowd react to this from bell to bell. These people were so invested in Dusty winning this match. They loathed the idea of Tully winning the belt here so much. Anytime Dusty dropped Tully with any offensive move, not a single person was in their seat. There's a point in this match where Dusty starts his comeback. His first move is a standard running clothesline off the ropes. When I tell you the deafening response this got from the crowd, dude, I'm not exaggerating that. It was absolutely deafening. They were so into Dusty's comeback. And here's the amazing thing about it. When you actually break down this match in a nutshell, at least from what we saw on TV, here's the extent of the match. Tully worked over Dusty's ankle and had him in a figure four leg lock for a while. Dusty sold. He made a comeback. And then they did all the heel shenanigans stuff at the end before the finish. 3 stages to the match, and the people didn't blink for 1 second. They rallied and stayed with Dusty through thick and thin as he's laying there in pain, selling in the figure four, and whenever his shoulders would fall to the mat, teasing the idea that he would give in, that he couldn't hold on, he couldn't withstand the pain, the people would scream, "No, Dusty, don't give in." Dusty would kick out, and the fans would go, "Oh, thank God." And when Dusty turned that figure four over, and Tully was screaming in agony, dude, it may as well have been Bryan Danielson winning the title in Mania. The finish, of course, an all-time classic 5-star finish in the history of the business. JJ starts running interference on the apron, so Dusty grabs him and puts him in a sleeper hold. And while JJ's struggling and on the verge of passing out, he reaches into his pocket and he slips in the brass knuckles so that Tully can grab the gimmick. And to keep the suspense going, instead of Tully just hitting Dusty with the gimmick and winning like you'd see in any other promotion today, Tully puts on the knucks. He goes to clock Dusty in the head, but Dusty backdrops Tully over the top of the floor. And while Tully's selling, Ric Flair runs over to, I think, slip the gimmick back onto Tully's hand because he either dropped it when he fell out of the ring or he took it off. I don't really remember. But as Flair's helping Tully back into the ring, Dusty goes for the back suplex. He tries to get Tully over the top into the ring. And he has Tully up over his shoulder. He's about to give him the backdrop. Tully dramatically raises his fist in the air to let everyone know shit's about to go down. He gives Dusty one big blow to the head. Dusty's legs collapse out from under him. Tully falls on top of Dusty's shoulders. Of course, making sure to conceal the weapon under his arm because he's a heel and he's good at what he does. And the ref runs over and counts 1. He counts 2. And he counts 3. And as soon as the ref counted 3, everyone in the crowd starts going ballistic. This great travesty has just occurred. Tully's the new champion via shenanigans. But just when you think they couldn't add more drama to the situation, Baby Doll hits the ring out of passionate rage and fury. And she starts wailing away on Flair out of frustration. She slaps JJ across the face, which gets the second biggest pop of the entire segment. And Arn and Tully snatch Baby Doll and pick her ankles. They're all restraining her on the mat while Flair goes up to the top rope. Teasing he's about to give Baby Doll a top rope leg drop and commit televised desecration. And of course, that's when all the faces file out and run the heels off. And there's a reason that this is such a memorable match and angle. Between the crowd reaction, the layout of the match, the drama of the match, the heat angle to lead to the title change, the afterbirth. It is amazing to me how something so simplistic and so grassroots fundamental could generate such a response. Simply put, an angle that in modern times could only be imitated, never duplicated. And of course, Dusty's out there with Baby Doll at the booth following the video to reflect on everything that went down. He's absolutely beside himself. He tells the Horsemen that they've stolen his belt, they've stolen his pride, so fuck it, they may as well take his clothes too. To which Dusty begins then to strip down to his jeans, including unhooking his belt right before they cut the commercial. So I can either assume that Dusty stopped at the removal of the belt, or he in fact stripped down completely nude and they had to cut away to it to quickly avoid lawsuits. With the continuation of the Magnum TA Nikita Koloff title drama, where they keep calling each other out for the match, but they never actually do the match, Magnum says that he has an open contract now, and all he needs is for Nikita to sign on the dotted line. He was also sporting a new U.S. belt here, which looked fantastic. Nice black leather with the gold and red coloring. Looked a lot more appealing than the standard silver U.S. title that he was carrying around for a while. Road Warriors versus Carl Styles and Bill Mulkey. Killed these fuckers in short order, and it was glorious. Then we had Ivan and Nikita out to talk about a couple different things. First to call out the Road Warriors and vow to take them out. And then Nikita got on the stick and started fanning out a bunch of papers, allegedly from his fans, that said Magnum didn't have the guts to face him for the U.S. title. And yes, a rare instance where I actually understood a Nikita Koloff promo. Rock and Roll Express took on Larry Clark and Bob Owens. Another rapid-fire review of a Rock and Roll Express match on this show. Fiery babyface offense, couple boring holds, double dropkick finish. Nothing else to say about it. Then we had Ric Flair out to basically put over all of the heel champions and make fun of the fact that, with the exception of Magnum, all of the babyfaces are losers because they don't have belts now. And I should note that among the champions Flair listed here, Midnight Express, who are the World Tag Team Champions, Tully Blanchard, now the National Heavyweight Champion, and of course Flair, the World Heavyweight Champion. No mention of Arn or the TV Championship. Whoops. And aside from that, he just started name-dropping a bunch of guys, challenging them to fight him. He first called out Ronnie Garvin, which was to be expected since they're feuding. Then he got on the subject of something involving Hawk, which I have no idea how he got to talking about him. And then he called out the Rock and Roll Express and told all the teeny bopper girls that if they want to fuck a real man, they can give Ric Flair a call. Only Flair could get away with aimlessly rambling about 5 or 6 baby faces at a given time and still end up tying it in with fucking girls by the end. Class act. Then we got, I think, gorgeous Jimmy Garvin's first televised match on NWA Studio Show Wrestling, right? I know we're watching him in World Class Championship Wrestling right now too, but I do believe this is his first official match on NWA TV. Squaring off against Rocky King here, and actually allowing the cameramen to film his matches, as opposed to World Class Championship Wrestling 3 years prior, where the entire gimmick was that he would not allow the cameramen to film his work. And of course, Garvin out there with Precious in the glittery, flashy blue garb. Looked absolutely astounding. And they're out there doing this match. It's a fun little squash. Garvin's a great heel, obviously goes without saying. And in the middle of the match, he starts wailing away on Rocky with chops, and he follows up with calling out, of all people, Wahoo McDaniel. Actually, he said Wahoo McDaniels, which I don't know if that was just a Freudian slip or if he actually meant to say McDaniels because he's a dick heel who purposefully mispronounces guys' names. But it did click as soon as Garvin called out Wahoo that we do indeed, at some point in the year 1986, see Wahoo McDaniel show up and work matches on the Superstation. And I have no idea when that occurs, but it is important to remember that at the point Wahoo showed up here to work in the NWA, I believe he was in his late 40s. Let's see, he debuted in the Worldwide Wrestling Federation in, 1963? Something like that. And he was already in his late 20s when he first broke into the business. By 1986, this dude was pushing 50. Which I know doesn't seem all that astonishing when you see guys like Jericho or Goldberg or Taker doing matches well into their 50s, but in 1986, that was a whole other ballgame. I don't remember how good he ended up being, but the fact that they brought Wahoo McDaniel in to work a program with Jimmy Garvin in 1986, it goes to show just how much talent they saw in Jimmy at that time. He really got that rocket ship push and then some. And his follow-up promo with calling out Wahoo for a match, supposedly the best Indian worker in the history of the business. And beyond him just being a great heel and constantly stopping mid-sentence to make out with Precious on camera, this man deserved to win Wrestler of the Year for the entire period of the early to mid-80s. Black Bart versus Dr. X. Excuse me. Black Bart won with the middle rope leg drop. And we had a Road Warriors promo where the only thing I wrote down about it is Hawk mocking Flair by saying that he's got more girls admiring his tongue than Flair has admiring his entire body. And when Hawk actually stuck his tongue out and wiggled it at the camera, I began to shake and shiver with unsettling goosebumps. We had Magnum back out for another fiery promo where, for the second time in less than 20 minutes, he said that he wants the U.S. title match with Nikita. To which I wrote down, so then book the fucking match and do it. All in caps, by the way. At least Magnum was as fiery and passionate as I was. And they completely took the piss and vinegar out of that fiery promo with putting me to sleep with a Baron Von Raschke match. For like the 14th fucking week in a row, a Baron match on TV. It was bored to tears, and Baron won with the claw after a match that went about 5 minutes longer than necessary. And the show concluded with Tully and JJ back out at the booth so that JJ could let everyone know that after speaking with some key journalists in the business, Bill Apter being one of them, he can confirm 100% that Dusty Rhodes versus Tully Blanchard for the National Heavyweight title was the greatest match of all time. Which I won't necessarily dispute. And they also let us know that Tully will be a fighting champion. Dusty can go piss off because he isn't getting another title shot anytime soon. Why? For no other reason than their heels. And while JJ's in the middle of his ranting, they just cut to the end credits because I think they ran out of time. Great show. Everything that involved the Horsemen on the show is just fantastic. Getting to see that footage of the national title match brought back a lot of memories of, well, what wrestling used to be. And it's also a prime model for what a lot of green guys in the business today would highly benefit from watching and learning from. I guess instead of only MJF, who apparently is the only young guy in the business that actually watches classic content and digests the material. Old school classic wrestling angles with actual meaning and actual drama that the people can identify with. It's the reason the business used to draw money, and I mean, you think with the footage out there for guys to gain easy access to on the internet, it's still sad to me how little the young guys in this sport actually have a vested interest in actually trying to obtain it. It's ridiculous. And going back in the time machine to a time in the business where the wrestling business used to get it, let's talk about this week's episode of World Class Championship Wrestling from March 12th, 1983, which also so happens to be my father's birthday. Also presented with a nice opening graphic from the WWE editing team to let us know of the upcoming technical difficulties for the programming. Hey man, you remember the struggle back in the day of watching videotaped content on live TV. A lot of glitchiness. But we begin this week with Jimmy Garvin and Sunshine joining Bill Mercer at the interview booth, where he informs us that he's had a change of heart in the last couple weeks. He has now promised the world that if David Von Erich puts up the Texas Heavyweight Championship against Garvin next week, he will give us the distinct pleasure of allowing the cameraman to actually film him in action. And of course, we got our answer for that challenge later in the program. Kind of unfortunate, though. I was hoping for several more weeks of Jimmy Garvin being scheduled to wrestle, but instead of him actually coming out to work, he just fakes out the fans and keeps fucking with the people. You know, it is good, though, that they're looking for ways to freshen up the main event scene a little bit. You know, especially by the time the show was over here, they ended up reverting back to the same beaten path of Freebirds versus Von Erich's combination matches for upcoming shows. You know, at least by throwing Jimmy Garvin in there, it keeps their main event picture fresh to involve the Von Erich family in something other than the Freebirds. Opening match for the program is Johnny Mantell versus Wild Bill Irwin. And this was definitely where the technical issues became a nuisance for a period of time. I did a quick Google search on Johnny Mantell because going in, I didn't know all that much about his background. I was obviously familiar with his brother Ken Mantell, who had more claim to fame in the business with his work in the NWA throughout the early to mid-70s. I also believe that by this point, he was well immersed in world class as an agent or a booker. I can't remember which one. But by 1983, Ken had pretty much wound down his in-ring career almost entirely. So I guess this was one of those son of the promoter ordeals where the higher-ups and the key backstage personnel's family get opportunities to work TV shows. I mean, take it for what it's worth, but I couldn't even find a wiki page for Johnny Mantell. So I have to assume his in-ring career was nothing short of unmemorable. And between the shaky camera and the fact that the match was average at best, it was kind of hard to get into it. It also ended in a 10-minute draw, which is amazing to me because the match felt like it went almost 40. I'll say this, though. It was certainly a million times better than this hideous atrocity of the great Toriatsu versus Mike Bond. Before we get to that, though, we had King Kong Bundy coming out to announce to Arman Hussein that the Great Kabuki is healthy and he's ready to fight. So whenever Hussein is ready to accept the challenge, him and Bundy are gonna take on Yatsu and I presume Hussein himself. And if you've watched several of my world-class recaps by now, you might remember I spent a good chunk of time talking about how horrible Toriatsu is/was in the ring. Last week, I believe, is where he debuted the dreaded and exaggerated stomach claw hold of doom. And he ended up using it here, and it still looked as repugnantly ridiculous as last week. As was Yatsu's chops to the back of Mike Bond's head, which were equally as ridiculous. All I wrote down, aside from the stomach claw and the chops, was horrible match, thank God it was mostly short. And we were also informed after the match that when Bundy names the time and place, him and Yatsu will be ready to fight him and Kabuki. Then we had Cold Facts with the Iceman. A look into the world of who the Iceman King Parsons is. And it turned out exactly how you would envision the Iceman King Parsons to be. We get an epic 1980s upbeat video pre-tape of Parsons in, I guess, what would appear to be some kind of warehouse, wherein Parsons is literally picking and carrying large blocks of ice over his back to show off his muscles. And every so often he would drop the ice blocks next to him, and he would strike a big old Scott Steiner forearm pose so we could just see his jacked up arms. Because fuck the gym and fuck big weights when you can just hoist up big blocks of ice. I gotta try that sometime. And just when you thought it couldn't get any wackier, we also get footage of him headbutting and breaking the ice in half. And we also see him doing a rear view hip attack on the ice contraptions and then doing a little wacky dance. And while the cars are passing by on the freeway while he's doing this, the only thing I can think is, I can only imagine what these people driving by are thinking watching this man take down blocks of ice with his ass. This was so great and so 80s in every way conceivable. Then we had our first of... it was really a double main event for the show. The long-awaited singles bout between Kerry Von Erich and Michael Hayes. And I think the best way I can describe it is this. They were having a relatively good grudge match. Kerry got to run wild early and chase Hayes around the ring. Hayes got a nice little momentary cutoff to work over Kerry's knee. And right as Kerry's making his big comeback, Hayes tries to give him an overhead backdrop. Kerry lands on his feet. He cradles Hayes. And David Manning counts the 3. Yes, the long-awaited grudge payoff after 3 months to simmer over Hayes and Gordy screwing Kerry out of the World's Heavyweight title in December. And their match goes less than 10 minutes and ends with a flash roll-up. All right, then. Most of everything in the segment centered around the afterbirth, with the Freebirds ganging up on Kerry to work over his bad leg. They end up trying to wrap and tape Kerry's legs together, and of course that's when Kevin and David run out to chase off the heels. And while everyone's in a frenzy and they're all fired up, Kevin and David, they tell David Manning that they want to kickstart the tag match. And David Manning says, yeah, let's do it. Terry, buddy, get your butts back out here. We're doing this match right now. So they come back from break and immediately dive into it. And whereas the previous Hayes-Carey match felt like it was rushed all to hell, this one actually felt like it was given the right amount of time. Good stuff in here with the faces controlling the action early. A little bit of heat on David before Kevin got an early hot tag. Heels ended up cutting off Kevin in the corner and trying to lock in the claw on Buddy, but that gave him a little time to work over Kevin to let him sell. And long story short, it all broke down at the end with all four guys. Terry Gordy ended up getting trapped in the ropes so Kevin could lock in the claw. Kevin ends up shoving Bronco Lubick aside, so he calls for the bell to throw out the match. I believe it was some kind of double DQ or something. I don't think they ever made an announcement. And the main story of the segment afterwards was all pretty much focused on Kevin completely snapping on Terry and continually going after him while he was tied in the ropes. And he ended up challenging Terry to a no DQ match in the post-match interview with Bill Mercer. So that was good. And they also announced David Von Erich and Jimmy Garvin for next week. Texas Heavyweight title on the line. So that seems like it'll be a pretty packed show when it's all said and done. Obviously, the two headers for the show with the Freebirds and the Von Erichs were great. As goes the same for anything involving gorgeous Jimmy Garvin on the show. You know, and the funny thing is, we haven't even seen him work a match in World Class yet, and he's already one of my favorite guys in the 80s. The Iceman video package was a nice little bit of hokey old school wrestling that I can always go back and appreciate. Generally, the show was kind of split down the middle. If you start watching from the King Parsons videotape through the end of the show, it was a very enjoyable show. I'd say skip the first 20 minutes and just focus on the two main event matches for the show. Skip all the prelim material because there wasn't a whole lot going on there. And like I alluded to at the beginning of the report, you know, you can definitely tell they're starting to beat the Freebirds Von Erich story to death by now. They're trying just about every combination of the book, from singles pairings to tag pairings, and it's very quickly running its course. That's all I can say. The people are still totally into it now, but you could definitely see how people really got fatigued of it by the time 1984 rolled around. But that'll wrap up another installment of the Friday edition of the 5 Starr Wrestling Report. Again, if you're checking out for the first time, please make sure you come back each Monday and Friday for new shows and new content. Subscribe, comment, like the show if you don't mind, as it'll especially help me out in the algorithms on YouTube. And we will be back this coming Monday for the Rampage and Power Report. As of right now, I don't have anything in the bucket aside from that. We'll see what else we could possibly get in store for that show. Until then, take care all. Peace.